Manager HQ, where we're interviewing product leaders and their journey into product management and their experience advice that they have for us. Today, I'm very excited to have David Siegel, who is currently Senior Product Manager at Microsoft. He's going to be talking to us about expectations in a product manager role. Thank you, David, for your time and being with us today.
Thank you very much. No, I appreciate it, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. And for those who are joining us live, thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions, comments, feel free to let us know where you're coming from, where you're watching. And if you have any questions, feel free to add it to the comment section, either on LinkedIn or YouTube, and we'll get to your question. So, David, I always like to start with, how did you get into a product management role? From what I understand, that you have a background in psychology, both a bachelor's and master's. So, can you walk us into your journey into product management?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you're right. I do have I got a bachelor's and a master's in research psychology and social psychology from Stanford University. But I was always interested in technology, and even in school, I was self-taught in HTML and JavaScript and a handful of other things. So I actually got a job after school as a web engineer for a short while before kind of pivoting out of that into the short answer is I worked in a lot of different industries. I actually worked in the legal industry for a while as a trial consultant, where I kind of honed my project management skills, before then pivoting into educational technology as a producer and product manager, and then kind of doubled down further into the world of product management, um, and pursuing roles outside of edtech, moving into fintech and trying different consulting in different domains. I mean, really just trying to discover where my perspectives would be helpful, what I had to learn and still develop to be more successful in my pursuit of more product management roles, and so on. So it really was a process of networking and learning and consulting and kind of jumping into the deep end. Um, and even at points, this isn't, well, claiming I had skills that I wasn't sure I did. For instance, saying I can help you with your UX on your product, and because I'd done a lot of UX work, but if it was in a totally different domain, maybe I didn't feel 100% confident that I really would know what to do, but being confident that uncertainty was actually part of the process, if I could put it that way.
Mhm. I love how you also mentioned that you've been always learning as you went from each job. Yeah, I'm reading the comments. Is this audio only? We should have video. Somebody does have video. Um, yeah, so while we're still in the first part of your journey into product management, there is a question about, did you ever pivot into product management? Why did you choose this path?
Yeah. So um, I think one of the things that I learned after kind of joining the workforce was that's where I really learned what the range of jobs really were. I think I was a little kind of late to the game in a sense. So I first jumped into jobs that I had immediately applicable skills. And so that's why I became, as I said, like a litigation consultant, because I had experience in communications, I had experience in social psychology and messaging and research and so on. So I could apply those research skills immediately. And then my pivot into educational technology was because I'd studied a lot of developmental psychology. And so I actually had a lot of background in that as well. So generally, each pivot was, I know enough about this that I could do this larger thing. So there was like a grain in there that I could kind of get a toehold on. So from educational technology, then into fintech, for instance, that I knew a lot about UX. I knew a lot about certain aspects underpinning the technology. I didn't know a lot about the fintech domain I went to work in, which in my case was private equity. But I knew enough about how to run teams and kind of general best practices that while I learned the domain and learned how to rely on the right people to learn about that domain, I could still be very productive and contribute to the organization and the product.
And then early on in your product management careers, what was the expectation of those roles?
It was very different org by org. And I think that's one of the challenges people face. There's several challenges you face in trying to get product management roles, but it's also in how they understand product management. For instance, when I was working in edtech, I made educational video games, software and hardware, and I actually had to kind of push to get more visibility and ability to provide input on the business side because that organization didn't view that as part and parcel of my role quite as much. Whereas a consulting gig I took on, they would basically want me to do everything and anything, but they also might have a specific idea that I was there for research and design, for instance. So it was a matter of kind of sussing out what contributions they needed. And then, as I mentioned, that fintech role, I think they really wanted their understanding was I was there really just to help keep the lights on. And so, in my mind, the challenge was how can I show that I can provide a lot more value than just that? How can I demonstrate that I can not just kind of keep this afloat, but actually build it or make the customers happier in one way or another?
Mm.
So it's
And
again,
then,
I guess the answer is it's kind of understanding what the org thinks they're hiring for, but not yourself getting too couched in that because you as a PM, you want to make sure that you're doing what you care about as a product manager, that what you think a product manager is there to do.
mm. And I guess this also, there's a question on mentorship. If you didn't know what there is to do, how did mentorship play in your career?
Yeah. I mean, I a lot of I did my mentorship during my early career was generally from more afar. I would read everything I could. I mean, someone mentioned Marty Kagan. I mean, just really reading these. There's so many luminaries that um, offer good thought leadership in a general sense for early career product managers, um, and and then I would trying to get into product manager communities with peers. I think was really the way that I approached mentorship. So it would almost be like a collaborative co-mentorship of just bouncing ideas off each other and talking through how can I achieve this, or I'm finding this hard, or because it's there is something really positive about being able to be more emotionally open with another aspirant in a way that you can't if there's someone who's within your organization. So my early career was really more about that kind of collaborative, kind of peer mentorship as opposed to finding someone much more senior than me. Since that is a challenging thing to find. It's a hard fit. It's hard to find the right fit rather, and and they get approached by so many people, and so there's a lot of headwinds for that.
I like that approach where you talk to others and brainstorm on ideas. Um,
Oh,
there is a
questions.
yeah, lots of questions. I love this. We have a lot of comments. We have a lot of questions.
Sure.
Let's start with the what are the expectations for an associate or junior PM, and then we'll get into more of the senior level question.
Sure. For an associate or junior, I definitely work with a lot of people who are just getting into product management. And I've seen them come from all kinds of different backgrounds. I really do think an interest in learning and an honest understanding of what skills one does have and what skills one wants to grow are crucial. I mean, you know, to be perfectly honest, I think associate, you just need to understand what skills are necessary to be successful, and be on the road of developing those skills. And I mean, the skills I see as, some amount of research skills and an understanding of how to apply them, some design skills, business strategy skills, and then some technical skills. And I don't think you need to be equally strong in all of them. I don't think you need to even have fully developed abilities in all of them. I think it's important to have probably one domain where you have particular skills, and then an interest in and an understanding of how to build the skills in the others, and being on a path towards learning, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah, curiosity is a big thing that I keep hearing. And now more senior, how have you seen senior product managers utilized at different companies you've worked for versus directors and mid-level PMs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest distinction that I've seen is there's a lot more freedom at senior level. You're understood to be that it's your job to take more initiative and do things that, whereas as an associate or junior or just sort of garden variety PM, um, you are more likely to be managed in a way that's going to help you develop your roadmap. It's going to trickle down a lot. Whereas as a senior PM, you will still have that, but I think the expectation grows to, and you should have some perspectives about what are the best directions to go in. The old view that the PM is the CEO of the product. I don't know that I think that maybe exaggerates the amount of input, the degree of input your average PM is able to provide in anything except a maybe very early stage product or company. But I do think you should be demonstrating initiative and wrapping your head around the strategic space that you're occupying in your product, and trying to get as close to the customer as you can, and so on, and in ways that you should not be waiting for the organization to invite you to do. It really is more about being scrappy and taking steps on your own. Yeah, I think that level of initiative and kind of freedom is really a piece. Now it's complicated because you also need to balance it against the org's perspectives and their understanding of your role, and you so there is a balancing that needs to be maintained between kind of senior oversight and then you taking the initiative. And I think that has to do with the other piece of it, which is more storytelling that you do personally to up the chain. I mean, I think I spend a lot of time making sure senior leadership is always aware of our plans. The goal is to make sure that they never have the experience of us releasing something into the wild and saying, "Oh, I had no idea you were going to do that," unless that was our intention. We want to make sure that our plans are socialized and aligned up the chain.
Yeah, and thanks for all the questions from the audience members. We have another question on metrics. I have heard a lot about metrics and measuring the right ones as a product manager, but does this stand equally relevant to a B2B industry as well? If so, can you share some metrics that are essential for B2B?
Sure. And actually, I realize I didn't make a distinction between director or in what I just said. So if I can just quickly say, whereas a senior level PM is more likely to be on production side and manage and a product owner embedded in an actual dev flow, whereas director would be managing multiple such people. So just to kind of clarify that. Not that it's a hard and fast rule. It's just what I've tended to see. So the question about metrics and B2B industry. So it really depends on what it depends both on what that product is doing and for whom and how contracts are structured. The B2B organizations I've typically worked at have involved annual contracts, and the difference between what that means is it just makes it so your revenue is expected to fluctuate less to a lesser degree month over month, but it also means when contract renewal time comes up is something you need to be aware of. So it mostly just changes your customer lifetime value calculation a bit. So I think customer lifetime value is still really important in B2B. But again, I hesitate to say here's the metrics for B2B, um, because it just depends. And kind of to give you another example, like engagement does matter in B2B, but engagement means something different in, let's say it's like a data analytics tool. Like I've worked managing a data analytics tool for the commercial aviation industry, for instance, and like comparing that to like Twitter engagement, it's going to be night and day. Because Twitter, you really could say more time spent on the platform probably does correlate to engagement in a straightforward way. You probably can define that as engagement. Whereas if someone's in a data product, it's trickier, and you need to use more signals, and you need to talk to people more, because more time spent in the product, that could mean they're happier, or that could mean they're hunting for information and they're not able to find what they're looking for. And so they're just, it's so you need to understand the customer goals and connect the metrics specifically to your understanding of what that type of customer is trying to achieve. And so I think it's more important than to have sub-segmentation of customers, and an understanding of kind of who your most valuable customers are and what success for them actually means.
Mhm. And that would vary from different org to org.
I'd say from product to product, but yeah, it can. Also, depending on what the org is trying to achieve in the longer term. I mean, I don't mean to sidestep an answer. I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of articles about metrics for B2B. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, I'm working on a product that does this, and I can't figure out what success should look like. What do you think it should? Like that's a much easier question to answer than generally speaking in B2B.
So to backtrack a little bit, do you think, or are there's a question, are certifications in business analytics helpful for a PM to begin in the role?
I don't know about certifications per se, but knowledge is helpful. And so if that certification reflects actual knowledge, then probably it couldn't hurt. The idea that a certification is a proxy that suggests that you have knowledge of something. If that's true, then that's great. But that could get you in the door for an initial interview, but that will not get you a job. What will get you a job is if you do get into a conversation with someone and they say, let's do a data deep dive on this. So here's the data, take an hour and pour through it and tell me what you find. And then you output really clever learnings, or you just demonstrate that you're able to actually do the work with the data. Then that's meaningful. So again, I think it's more about what you're learning rather than what certifications or degrees you necessarily have.
Mm. And then another question, can you speak to the need of experience with agile frameworks in the PM space?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Agile is definitely a popular buzzword. It has been for a while now. I've worked with a lot of different Agile frameworks. I mean, generally speaking, the the main benefit I've found is the assumption that teams should be able to go fast and have fast impact, I think is a really positive thing. It also depends on what kind of space you're in. If you're in a heavily regulated space, then you need to be careful, and you need to make sure anything that you release, you can't just release something just out of curiosity. There could be legal ramifications and so on. But generally speaking, I try to structure the agile flow for the dev team I'm working with and give them the opportunity to buy in and kind of decide. If Kanban works best for them, then we can do it that way. If they want a strict sprint where literally after the first day of the 2-week sprint, no new tickets can go in, then that's fine. It really is about structuring it for the team. But I think it's because it's all about creating a collaborative workflow where dev team members feel respected and heard and are able to really contribute in meaningful ways. And that includes as much includes what you do set up for them, like retro and actually understanding what they say and at the end, the planning at the beginning, as what you don't do. For instance, not scheduling a dev for a meeting at 11 a.m. If you have a 9 a.m. stand up, then letting them have a free day so that they can actually do their work. unless you absolutely need them to, and then socializing with them and making sure that, it's important to understand how your devs work and what they need.
So communication is a skill that is a must for product managers and having influence on different
Yeah.
teams.
I mean, I sort of blithely skipped over, oh, you need to be, research, design, strategy, and technical. Yeah, I mean, I think actually storytelling and the ability to collaborate effectively are probably the next level skills that you need to have. Just because understanding how people work, being able to tailor your message for them, being able to work effectively with them, not just saying, I need this, therefore you have to do it, because that's not only will that upset people, but you just won't get the outcomes that you want. So understanding where they're coming from, what their priorities are, if they're not on your team, and if they are on your team, understanding what else they're working on, trying to make so they aren't doing throwaway work that you end up pivoting away from because you're prioritizing something else suddenly. Yeah, it's the people skills and the understanding of, even if they're not your direct reports on the dev team, they really do look to you for prioritization and a certain amount of protection from the org, and understanding that is absolutely crucial for sure.
Thank you for all of those important skills too, and reiterating all of that. Next question: what are the skills, experiences, credentials most valuable to convince hiring teams to take a chance on someone looking to become a PM mid-career?
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
What are the skills, experiences, credentials most valuable to convince hiring teams to take a chance on someone looking to become a PM mid-career?
So by mid-career, do you mean a mid-career PM, or that you were doing something else and you want to pivot?
Zach would have to clarify, but let's say they're pivoting.
Okay. I think if you have experience in anything that's relevant to the domains that I've talked about, I think that you can leverage that and be a domain expert in, like, if you've been a UX designer, for instance, you can be the UX champion PM, and that's a really strong fit. You again need to be honest with yourself and the org about where your weaknesses are. Say, well, I know everything. I know a lot about UX from a problem solving standpoint, because the difference is the designer or the research, like the designer comes up with answers, whereas the PM, you're coming up with questions. And so you're saying, it's in the same way you're approaching your software engineers. You say, I want to achieve this outcome. You write the user story. You tell them what you want to achieve. You don't tell them how. So I think that's the mindset challenge. And if you can show that shift and really, and again, we've talked about curiosity a lot, show that I'm really curious to know what the best UX might be. Whether that means writing questions to ask, or whether that means designing a few options and presenting them. But I think, at the end of the day, knowing someone in a company who you can talk to and getting some honest feedback is going to be the best way to get a foot in the door. And there's kind of no way around that. That I think networking is always going to be the best way to make a change in your career trajectory. Yeah.
I hope that answered Zach's question. So there is a question to speaking a bit on doing continuous discovery on oneself and product management practices in a team, organization, product to product practice, so to speak.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find was this in the chat?
Yeah. I've learned about some not awesome PM practices and culture at some companies. Could you speak a bit to doing continuous discovery?
Yeah. Not all organizations that are hiring PMs really want someone to do a product manager job. Some of the time they really just want somebody to execute on a pre-existing plan, and they really kind of want a project manager who can do a little bit of prioritization. That's not necessarily a bad thing, Where it gets bad is if they start pivoting in a lot of different directions. That's where it gets very negative for a development team. If devs are halfway through something and then it gets thrown away, and the PM can't do anything about it. So that is a tricky situation. That definitely happens. It happens more often than it probably should. In terms of continuous discovery on oneself and product management practices in a team, I mean, I think that has to do with it helps to have devs who are knowledgeable about good and bad PMs, so they can give you feedback. Definitely getting feedback. I mean, at least twice a year from your devs, like actually having a review process, a 360-degree review process. That ongoing retro. I mean, I think being a PM is very hard because it requires a lot of, you really have to be pretty humble and willing to take criticism, because you are all roads lead to you. You are the hub at the center of a lot of wheels, and when a dev team does things great, you often get the credit. Which means it's important to tout their accomplishment and talk about them. When things go bad, you will also get the blame. And when processes are a little confusing, you will kind of get the blame. It is your job to kind of help straighten out processes. It's kind of your job to say, could things be going better? And if they could, how? So it really requires, I think, a constant ability to get really reductionistic and really holistic constantly. And it can be very exhausting. It's very difficult, because if you really just want to like get something done, you want to build this feature, get it out. Still, it requires a lot of, in my experience, a lot of soul searching kind of on a weekly basis to say, could I have said that better? And reaching out to somebody and say, hey, I just wanted to make sure, I'm not telling you how to do your job. I just meant it this way. And so a lot of that, like getting out of your comfort zone fairly frequently.
Yeah, those are all important points. Thank you for sharing that. Next question. As a junior product manager, do you think it is more beneficial to have a senior product manager mentoring you very closely, or take steps on your own in a more early stage, fast growing company and far away mentoring?
Right. I don't know that it is either or. I think you will find what I did is I threw everything at the wall. I tried everything and saw what stuck. And like I found it was very hard to find a senior person who would mentor me. I just I didn't manage to make that work. Later, I did find more occasional mentors once I'd kind of demonstrated a little more capacity in the domain. I mean, I think if you have the risk tolerance to be able to join an early company as a product manager, and and the career opportunity to do so, meaning that means the pay is going to be lower than it would be at a big company on average. That company could go away in a year, so you could be unemployed more readily. But you're going to learn a lot, and it's going to be very challenging in very positive ways, hopefully. And you're going to get to contribute in ways that you probably aren't comfortable with. You will be asked to review technical decisions, and you will have to have opinions about these things and what to prioritize first. It's way different at an early stage company, because when you say, if you have a product that's relatively successful out in the world, say, what should we build next? It's like, well, we're already printing money, so I don't know, let's work on this. And it's what you decide isn't necessarily going to be that impactful, versus at an early stage company, you'll have a list of, well, these 5 features are absolutely necessary. They just are. And then which is great. So what do we do first? And that's not a theoretical question. That's the question you will have to answer Monday, right? Or have answered before Monday, so the dev team can get started on something and hopefully flesh out. So I think that there's the learning opportunities from being at an early stage company are going to be greater, but you probably won't. But all things being equal, chances are you won't be at that company for as long, just because most companies don't make it to Series C. and often through no fault of their own. So, the way that I think of a lot of career decisions, I mean, it is a little bit kind of like a game of Frogger. You are sort of constantly jumping 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and you do have to look out for yourself and not assume the organization where you're working has your best interests in mind. Some do, but some don't. And in the same way that culture fit is just as important as if not more so than skill fit. But I really think finding what the best opportunity for you personally is really the most important thing. And again, I don't mean to sidestep the question with that last bit, but it really is. It has to do with where your skills are right now, and frankly, where you hope to get in like 5 years.
Yeah, that's all amazing advice. And we could go on and on. There's so many questions that I would have loved to get to, but we only have so much of your time, David. So I think we can wrap it up with maybe sharing some of the resources that have helped you. And if for those who want to ask more questions to David, we have included a way to reach him by LinkedIn or the email that is in the description.
Sure, and there's so many additional great questions that I mean, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer more questions. I mean, these are some really great questions, and I can tell that this is a very well-read and experienced audience. So these are great.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe we can end it with any resources that you would share to help those either pivoting into product management or want to advance into more senior level career in product management that have helped you.
Yeah, yeah. I think as I really enjoy reading writers like Ben Thompson, Stratechery. I think one thing that you can really do for yourself is it's really easy to spend all your time trying to learn about product management, and that is important. But it's also important to read and understand and consume strategic analysis of actual business decisions that are happening. What's great about someone like Ben Thompson is he'll give predictions. He actually draws lines in the sand, and sometimes he's wrong. And if he says he's wrong, and he's just it's very refreshing. But he also will deep dive on strategic directions and his analyses, and it's just he's smart and it's interesting. And following other product leaders is always going to be beneficial. I mean, right now, like Lenny Rakitsky is always always has great thoughts. Yeah, there's so many great product leaders out there who are providing content, not just to help you become a product manager, but to help you be successful as a product manager. And that distinction is there's getting the skills to look like one on paper or to get the opportunity to act as one. And then there's, now that you're acting as one, what do you do? And when you get to that point, you don't want to not have the framework or not have the analytical understanding of how does someone in your role think, or how could they think? It's important to do so. I mean, there's a lot of messages in the chat also about hypotheses and experiments, and that I think is a huge piece of it. It's then when you do get the opportunity to contribute in these ways, being able to say, my analysis of the domain is this, and I have a hypothesis that this is either the most valuable thing we could do next, or this is the riskiest thing we're doing, and then I could structure that into a fast experiment that we could run over a week or over 2 weeks and get data that would help guide us. You're never going to have data that says, well, you're rarely going to have data that says 100% this is the way to go. You're going to have data that, but it can help validate a hypothesis or argue against a hypothesis. So definitely structuring your thoughts in big and little ways, from here's the strategic understanding of the space down into now here's the tactical steps that we want to take next, and here's why.
Yeah, no, that is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing everything. A lot of gems in this talk. So thanks to everyone with all your amazing questions. And feel free, if we didn't answer your question, to email David directly. Thank you so much, David, for your time.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everyone for showing up. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye.